Welcome back. This is part 6 of How to Read Literature Like a Professor. We're going to try to get through several more techniques now as we analyze literature. The next one we're going to look at is violence. The chapter is called More Than It's Going to Hurt You Concerning Violence. So, the chapter presents this idea that violence in literature usually means more than just a punch or a kick or a jab or what have you. Our author explains that there are two kinds of violence in literature. There's character caused, which kind of is the mundane shooting, stabbing, drowning, poisoning, bombing, hit and run, etc., etc., etc. The mystery genre fits in this category, so as we read and then they were done, most of the murders happen just to progress the story. Like there has to be something to progress the plot. Those are just character caused. Then there's death and suffering, which the characters aren't responsible for, and it's author inflicted. These are then when accidents aren't really accidents at all. And this is typically when there is some deeper meaning behind the accident or the disease or the violence. For example, if a character were cursed with the plague in the year 2012 or 20, whatever year, pick your year. This is a long time after the Black Plague. There might be some symbolic meaning or reason why this was the disease they were stricken with. Maybe there was some behavior, or the idea that is supposed to link us back to history is present. Violence is death and suffering. These are usually more than just regular violence. So here are the questions to ask yourself when you are trying to decide if violence is more than what it seems. First, what does the type of misfortune represent thematically? What does this thematically tell me? Second, what famous or mythic death does this one resemble? Is there something from Greek mythology or in a fairy tale or from some religious background or in the Bible? And the final question you ask is why this kind of violence and not some other kind? Why the plague and not chickenpox or some other disease? Um, let's show you a quick clip from a movie called Fight Club. It's the very last scene. So in this scene, we see Edward Norton explaining at the end, after he's battled with this inner battle of himself, and the characters are wreaking havoc throughout the city. This is the final scene.
You shot yourself. Yes, but it's okay. Marla, look at me. I'm really okay. Trust me. Everything's gonna be fine. You met me at a very strange time in my life.
So as the buildings crumble around, we begin to see this dystopian theme emerge, and that the chaos present will cause the renewal or the revamping of society. It's not just chaos for the sake of chaos, just to blow up a building. There is some deeper purpose in this. Our next technique is with symbolism, dealing with the idea of symbolism. So our author asks, is that a symbol? And his simple answer is, sure it is. Not all symbols are objects or images. They can be actions, they can be gestures, they can be thoughts as well. Symbols rarely have one specific interpretation, and this is what makes symbolism difficult. We all come from different backgrounds and different experiences. And so when we say, is that a symbol? Well, to some person it might be, to another person it may not. The author has an intention when they write a story, but the way it is interpreted and the background that we have that we take with us as we're reading make a big difference and it really matters. So if you are curious, am I looking at a symbol? Is that not a symbol? I don't know. I can't tell. It just looks like the curtains were blue or green or whatever our example was earlier. You need to ask yourself, what is the writer doing with this image or the object or the act? What is the purpose of the curtain, right? What is the purpose of the little china figurines sitting on the table? What is the purpose in what is being described? Remember, writers have editors, and there is nothing unnecessary in a book. It's got to be important if it's there. You have to ask yourself what possibilities are suggested by the movement of the narrator, or the lyric. What does it feel like it's doing? This feeling is something that you will build up as you become a stronger and better reader. You've got to use your instincts as well as your knowledge. You want to build on the background that you already have from stories, from education, and building on this background will help you understand a lot more deeply. We're going to look at another little movie clip from Schindler's List. And there's this scene with this girl in the red coat. Once we watch it, I'm going to ask you to kind of consider what could this red coat represent? Why in this world that's black and white is there one girl wearing red? Well, as we are waiting for this to load, you can see this little girl's walking around in a very chaotic world. People are being shot and fired at and killed all around her. And as they're being killed around her, she is wandering, trying to find her way.
Let's go, please. Come on.
And here we see this little girl hiding at the end. One could interpret this as a black and white world, or at least what seemed like a black and white world for some of the Nazi sympathizers and Nazis themselves. When he sees this girl in a bright red color, she stands out. It's no longer black and white. It's no longer clear what's right and what's wrong. That red that she's wearing could also represent the blood that's being stained all around her. It might also represent the innocence that she has, or the loss of innocence as she's watching all this chaotic world all around her. This symbolically will speak differently to different groups of people. And it's important to remember that that's okay. The next literary technique that we will discuss is that of Christ figures, and these are very prevalent in Western literature, at least. So the title is called Yes, She's a Christ Figure Too. The values and principles of religion inevitably form an author's literary works. If you remember earlier, we spoke about how education wasn't necessarily required 100 years ago, and so our authors were going to schools that were taught by Catholic nuns or priests, even very religious society, and so our authors would have been raised in a community um, based on the Bible. They may not agree with what was spoken in the Bible, but this is where their knowledge comes from, and then when they write, they're going to include that. So if you're reading a story, you might ask these a few questions and check off a checklist here. If the character that you have is crucified in their death, or if they have wounds in their hands or their feet or in their side, if they're portrayed with their arms outstretched, you might have a Christ figure. And the idea of their arms outstretched, if you think back to the Shawshank Redemption in the previous clip, in the previous video, you'll see that his arms are spread open wide. He is almost the scapegoat for the prison, but he is free. He's a new man. He could be considered, Andrew Dufresne in that movie could be considered a Christ figure. If your character is in agony, if they're self-sacrificing, if they're good with children, if there is mention of loaves and fishes and water and wine, if your character is dead by the age of 33 years, if they're a carpenter or they have humble modes of transportation like on a donkey, if they walk on water or alone in the wilderness, if they have some sort of confrontation with the devil, maybe they're tempted in that confrontation, if they're last seen in the company of thieves, if they create or speak a lot of parables, if they're buried but then rise on the third day, if they have disciples, if they're very forgiving, if they've come to redeem the world, then you probably are dealing with the Christ figure, and your character doesn't have to have all of those characteristics. But if they have some of them, you might have a Christ figure. That'll end this video. We'll pick up with the next video.